number one reason I've started companies in the first place is when I started my career, I would write scientific papers, and I guess as a naive young person, I thought if I wrote papers, then people would use them. And people in the scientific community did use them, but I wanted to see more than that. I wanted to see patients be able to use them, people be able to use them. So we wrote these patents, and actually after about 10 years, it took a long time, finally some large companies would license them. But the problem was those large companies really didn't develop them. They'd do an experiment or two, and then they would just stop. And one day, Alex Klebanoff, who's a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, who's in the chemistry department at MIT, said, "Bob, we should start a company." And we did, and that company was a little company called Enzotech, which had several of my students in it, and later it merged to become what's today called Alkermes, which has been quite a successful company. And they developed these drug delivery systems, among other things, and they've been used to treat millions of patients. There are a number of elements that I think about when we're going to start a company. First, have we made a real breakthrough? Two, have we advanced that breakthrough far enough that we might publish it, that we have animal data? Three, have we gotten really good patent protection on, and does that paper and does that work lead to really good patents, which I think are key if you're going to get the investment? Four, do we have people in the lab who have maybe worked on these projects who passionately want to be a part of that company? And I guess five is what I'd call a platform technology. And what I mean by that is a technology where you can use the same manufacturing procedure, the same process over and over again, but for different products. And part of the reason for doing that is and this is nothing against a large company, but if I had a great product, say a microsphere that could be used to treat any disease, and I licensed it just to, say, Merck, well, they would use it for their drugs, and it wouldn't be used for Pfizer's drugs or Lilly's. The beauty of having a small company is it can do arrangements with many, many companies, and that will greatly expand the utility and the use of the core technology. If I had a single product, maybe I would just license it to a large company. Well, startup's really a team effort, and in our case, I and maybe some of the scientists in the lab help provide the science, but it also takes people in the finance community, so we work very closely with a number of venture capitalists. It takes people in the business community, which I think is really key, and those people have to raise money. They might do deals with different companies and things like that, and provide the management. And so it's real, and then we collectively try to think through the strategy of, again, if you have a platform technology, what is your first target, second target, third target? And so I think these things end up being really important. You want to write scientific papers. I think if you're in a company, you do have to focus. I mean, you really, want to take something, and you want to do great research too, but you want to focus and really make that research into a product that people will use. You have to think more about it, things like intellectual property and things like that. You're probably in both cases you have to think about money and raising money. Those are, you have sort of different strategies depending on what you're trying to do. Having a great CEO is probably the single most important thing for companies. I wish it wasn't the case. I wish it was just the science. But I think really for medical companies in particular, where you don't get that many shots on goal because things are often so expensive, having a great CEO is critical. I think, what are the characteristics? The person should be extremely bright, though they don't necessarily have to be a scientist, but they should be able to pick up the science and really understand the science well enough to not only explain it, but really answer questions. I think they have to be charismatic. They have to have people in the company have to feel that this is a real leader, that they're on a mission that's going to do great things. And by the same token, that person has to be able to convince investors in an honest way that they're going to succeed, that the investment's worth doing, whether that investment be financial people or a possible corporate partner. Ideally, the great CEO would also have vision. That's a hard thing to quantitate, but it's somebody with the ability to really think about how the future's going to be. They should be good with people. They should, really have high integrity. They should treat people well. They want to surround themselves with people who are ideally better than themselves, so they shouldn't be threatened easily. So there's a lot of very important characteristics.